An artist when I was young, and then discovered computers very early on at like age 12, 13, and I didn't know what design was, but basically learned that you could do art on computers and people would pay you for it. And I thought, okay, well this is definitely what I'm going to do for my career. I studied design at UCLA, down in LA, and then had all the different design jobs that you can have. So I worked in-house at CBS doing TV show websites. I worked in-house at a big agency where we did websites for like Princess Cruises and Hugo Boss and all that sort of stuff. And then actually I started a company with a friend of mine. His family and my family came from Israel on the same flight. So he was 10 years old, I was 6 years old. He became close friends with my brother. His name is Roy Rubin. The company is called Magento, which maybe you heard of. So started that in 2006. And a year into building Magento, we were about 30 people, and I get a call from a startup from Palo Alto. They're looking for design leaders. I told them I have a company that I started down here. Why would I leave that company to join another company? It makes no sense. It's crazy. But they said, look, come for the weekend, meet the people, meet the team, and if you don't like it, you fly back down to LA, no big deal. And my older brother at the time lived close to where the company was. And I flew for the weekend, and I fell in love with it, and that company was Facebook. So this was in 2006. There was about maybe 100 people there at the time in 2006 when I first went to visit. And it wasn't easy. It took maybe 2 or 3 months of conversations and going back and forth, and should I do this or not do this? It was a very tough decision, but eventually I said I'm going to do this. And in February of 2007, I joined Facebook as a design lead. So it was me, 4 other designers, 20 to 25 engineers, a lot of other people on support and all these other teams. But like, you know, the people building the thing in this room is about the people building Facebook when I joined. So this was the group. And it was amazing. It was I was there for 6 years. For the first 2 years, I was designing all the stuff, you know, like a Facebook platform where you could like build applications on Facebook, Facebook timeline. I mean, all the stuff that people used on Facebook. And then for my last like 3.5 years there, I managed what's called the branding and communication design team. So very quickly after I joined, we realized like anytime we would do something, people would hate it. And the reason we would just like work on the thing and then ship the thing, like basically just like push it to the world. And we never told people like, why are we doing what we're doing? And that makes people upset. So, you know, the equivalent is like, imagine your house. I come to your house and when you're away at work, I put all new furniture. You come back and I say, you know, you're welcome. I gave you all the new furniture. Like, you should love me now. And most people are like, okay, it's nice furniture, but I don't know how to use it. I actually want my old stuff back. So that's what we were doing. So we started a team that was meant to communicate the changes that Facebook was making, all the visual design, everything else. So that was the team I led for 3.5 years. And honestly, in 2009, 2010, if you would have said, Ben, where are you going to be in 10, 15, 20 years? I would have said, I'm going to be at Facebook. It was an amazing experience. You saw that you were building the thing that, you know, huge parts of the world were using. People loved it. I thought I was going to be there for my entire career, and I was sold this was an amazing company, and I would never leave. And then around 2011, a few changes started happening. One was the company was starting to be about 1,000 people. And all of a sudden, the things I could do in a day took months or 6 months, things like that. 2, a lot of people starting companies were coming to me and asking me, how do I do design well at my company? Like you guys, Facebook, it looks like it's starting to be a big company, it's going well. I want to do it at my company too. And I would ask them, okay, what are you guys building? And it would be things in healthcare, education, financial services, business tools. And the companies were 80, 100 employees, 10, 15, 20 engineers, and now they're saying, okay, now we need to think about design. And I'm like, you know, all these people that were coming to me, I'm thinking, it's too late. Like you're you know, the equivalent for me was imagine you're building a building, and you bring the contractors and the builders, and for 3 years you build, and then 3 years into it, you look at the building and you say, like, I think we need to hire an architect. And it's like, yeah, you should have hired an architect before you started building. What are you thinking? And for me, it was really troublesome because these were, my dad's a doctor, so I was helping him out trying to like convert his office from handwritten to electronic records, and all the software sucked. Financial services, if you've ever used banking software, they all suck. So you just see all these tools and services that society relies on. Design is nowhere to be found, and it's 2011, 2012, and I'm thinking to myself, like, what's going on here? This is terrible. And so I started talking to a lot of designers that I knew, and I was asking, what's going on? Why don't we see better design products and services in the world? And now it's 2011, 2012. I thought design, it was a thing that had come, and it's if you start a company and it's a tech company, it should be design and business and engineers, and that's what you need. And that just wasn't the case. So there are a bunch of reasons why design wasn't happening. Some of them were like designers are very insular, so designers like to hang out with other designers. So if you go to someone that goes to business school and you say, how many designers do you know? It's usually 0. If you go to designers and they have an idea for a company and you say, how many engineers or business people do you know? And they say 0 also, because they hang out with other designers. So there wasn't enough collaboration between designers and business leaders. There wasn't enough. Also, designers didn't know anything about starting companies. So I don't know if any of you went to like Betzalel or some of these schools, and I went to visit them a couple of years, and they're very similar to schools in America. Actually, in some ways they're like even ahead, I thought. But the reality is, like, when I went to design school, I was never told how to be an entrepreneur. I was never told how to think about building a business and all the things that you need to know, and all the, thinking about the different metrics and things like that. So designers didn't know anything about that. We didn't know the right people. So there's all of these problems. And we got together a group of about 20, 25 designers, again, about the size of this room, and we said, let's start an organization that's going to like try to change that. And the second we did that, everyone in Silicon Valley wanted help. So in a way that we didn't expect. So like big venture funds, billion and a half dollar funds said, why don't you guys come work for us, go company by company and help them figure out design. And we're thinking, like, how did you invest in companies by the hundreds that don't understand design when they're building software? That's like engineering and design is a fundamental thing you need to figure out. And so we were quickly overwhelmed. So I was still at Facebook while we were doing this. My partner, Enrique Allen, was still at an accelerator called 500 Startups. And we were just working in the nights and weekends trying to like help people, connect designers to engineers, like basically do all the things that we wanted to do, but we were basically working 2 full-time jobs. And one of the things for me that I think is a good signal is like the things that you're doing on your nights and weekends. Those are the things like where your passion is, and try to make those things the things you do for your day job. So all of a sudden, for the first time since I had joined Facebook, I found that my nights and weekends, I wasn't thinking about Facebook, I was thinking about something else. And eventually I said, look, if I'm thinking about this other thing, maybe that's the thing I should be doing. And so 2012, I said, okay, I leave Facebook. We joke, it's cold outside the castle, and it's very true. Like, you go from this big company. I left right before they IPO'd. So imagine I see everyone I know, they're ringing the bell, like, oh, money's coming down from the ceiling. And you're with a friend of yours, and you're working in a tiny office, like way less big and nice than this one, on this other thing. And you're just like, why are we doing this? This is a bad idea. It was a huge need, and it's been an amazing experience. So we've been doing it for 4 years. The first year and a half, we basically were trying to model and do all the things that we wanted to do. So it was like, if we had money, would people want to come to us and take our money? If people took our money, can we help them build great design products and services? And yes, was the answer to that. And once we figured that out, we basically went out as two designers, not two people who went to business school, and we said, look, we want to start a fund. And typically it's people who went to business school who are doing this, and we raised almost $17 million to do Designer Fund 1. And we started investing out of that in 2014. And last month we made the final investment out of that first fund, and we're almost done fundraising Fund 2. So there's going to be a second fund. It's going to be even bigger. It's been amazing. The companies are all the kinds of services that we want to see in the world. And yeah, that's kind of I think the next phase of the journey. So that's the background. The things that are kind of keeping me up at night that I'm thinking a lot about these days, a few things. One is we're seeing a lot of design leaders that have depth in design, but now they're being asked to run parts of a business almost like a business leader. And designers don't have the knowledge to do that. So you go to design schools, or frankly, there just does not exist a way a program to help designers become leaders. And so frankly, when I came here a few years ago, I was inspired by the Mechinot. So I saw a guy who I met with who was part of the Mechinot, or part of creating the Mechinot. He was showing me how he was developing leaders in Israel. I was like, this is a perfect model to take that and apply it to designers, because why? He was thinking, in Israel, if we could create better leaders, you have more impact, because those leaders can then impact people below them in the army and other places. What I was seeing was, if you're a designer at Facebook or Airbnb or Square or whatever, the thing that you're building touches millions of people, and if you can get that person to think a certain way or act a certain way, that's a huge change that you can have on the world. So one of the things that we did when we started was open up the equivalent of a mechina for design leadership in America. So we call it Bridge. We have run 150 designers through this program. There's 8 cohorts. 7,500 designers have applied to do it since we started, so we know it's like huge need. And they're applying from all over the world to do this, so I know we need to do 10, 20, 50 times the size to really have the impact that we want. So one big learning is we need to do better at developing design leaders that have broad skill sets. That's number one. 2 is around the ethics. One of the things, the whole story with Facebook is one kind of thing that's maybe accelerated it, but frankly, it's something I've been thinking a lot about, which is good design is not necessarily good, right? So what's a good example? A beautifully designed cigarette vending machine. Like, it can be, the money goes in very cleanly, it's very easy to understand, it gives you the cigarettes that you want, and then you can smoke yourself to death. So, right? So that's a very obvious one, but there's all these other systems and products that we're building that are well designed, but they're not necessarily good for society or good for the world. So I'm realizing, doctors take this oath of doing no harm. Designers don't take an oath. There's nothing that says that good design needs to do good in the world. So we're falling short there, and there's a bunch of designers thinking about what we do for that, and it's a very tough, it's a hard thing to do, especially in businesses. And if you guys are designers and you work in businesses, then I'm sure there's people who you're working with who are like, well, what if we did it like this? So people, won't exactly so they'll just go really fast through this, or they don't need to read this or whatever, right? We're always manipulating people, and hopefully we manipulate people to create more good, not more bad. So that's the second thing, is around design ethics. First thing was design leadership, and the third thing, I guess it relates to design ethics, but one of the things we're thinking a lot about is how do we invest in companies that should exist. So I'll give you an example. One of the questions I started asking maybe a year ago when we started investing in companies, I started asking people who are starting companies, okay, let's say your company does amazing. And in the next 5 years, you and I are sitting here across the table, and your company has done everything that it wanted to do. There's 1,000 employees, you're reaching millions of people or whatever, or millions of businesses, whatever the company is. How is the world better because your company is successful? And I think 50, 60, 70% of people do not have a good answer for that. They usually say, well, it's a big business, there's a big market opportunity, and well, more people can buy advertising, and you start like trying to pull out, why is the world improved because your thing is successful? I don't want to know that you can make a lot of money. A lot of businesses can make a lot of money. So what's the next level? It's like, why should this exist at all? And the reason we started asking this is, it's kind of like, one is we want to work on the things that we want to see in the world. And I think it's very easy to fall in love. You see big time people and investors that you look up to, and you say, wow, everyone's investing in this thing and the best people are starting to work on it. And it's very easy as an investor to want to be part of that. But we started just saying, like, hold on, like, it doesn't matter who's involved. It doesn't matter all the that kind of pull towards it. Like, really ask yourself, like, do I want to be telling my friends, go work at this company? Do I want to be fighting and hustling for that company? And more I realize, like, unless that company has a very strong story of why they should exist, like, we don't want to work for it. Other people we know don't want to work for it. And so the companies that do have that, they tend to be, I think, doing better. More talented people want to work at those companies. They raise money better. So we're just starting to see all that come together. So that's the third piece that's starting to, are things that I'm just thinking a lot about. And then it's just like, how do you communicate that externally that, hey, if you're coming for money from us, make sure you have answers to these questions. And if it's no, you're not going to get money from us. And maybe you go to other investors, and maybe other investors will do it, but we just won't do it. So those are a few of the things that we're thinking about. So that's it. That's my short history and kind of short future. So I'll open it up for questions from you all.
Question.
Go ahead.
Can you tell us, just brief through your time on Facebook, can you tell us a little bit more about the challenges and things you did there?
The challenges of Facebook. It was endless challenges. Maybe some of the big ones. One is you're under a huge microscope, so anything that you did, even if you thought it was a better designed thing, it was just like having the whole world watch everything you do. I'll give you like a simple example. One of the first things I did when I got there, there was when you sent someone a message on Facebook in 2007, you would get an email and it would say something like, Ben, Yakil sent you a message on Facebook, click here to read it. And then you click the thing and then you have to go back to the site. And I'm like, this is so stupid. We should just have the message in the email. Why do I need to go back to the site? So I get frustrated by this thing at 9 a.m. I walk into the office at like 10 a.m. I go to an engineer and I say, look, this is a terrible experience, we should change it. He's like, I totally agree, and guess what? I've already coded it up. It's just commented out. I just need to uncomment it, but you have to get Mark's approval. No problem. Mark, you know that thing where we send an email every time someone gets a message? Yeah. It's stupid, we should just have the message in the email. Yeah, that sounds good. Approved. So 11:30, we're already like pushing the change live. So it's been two and a half hours. It goes live to the site. At the time, I think we were, 15 million users, so it was pretty quick. And the change starts happening. And then I go to lunch and I was like, oh, great morning. I come back and all of a sudden there's a news story in like a big, it's called TechCrunch, it's like a big tech site, and it says, Facebook forgoes millions in revenue for better design. And it was praising us for making, putting users first and making a better design choice, even though millions of dollars would be lost. And I was like, what are they talking about, millions of dollars? And it's like, oh yeah, ads are run on the site, on the website. They're not in emails. So if people it's a better user experience. You don't have to go to the website, but guess what? Like traffic to the site goes down. So those are the kinds of things where you want to move fast, you want to do better for people, but and that was a much simpler system at the time. Now it's so much more complex.
It was the time of move fast and break things.
It was the time of move fast and break things. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just keeping that ecosystem in your head, understanding the business model in your head. Then there was the challenges as the thing grew. At first people were using it as a fun tool, but very quickly people started using it for very serious things. So some of the things you guys don't see, but maybe hear about, are like, very early on in Egypt, people started getting tortured for their passwords, so that the Egyptian government could go into their Facebook account and see all what their friends are doing, and then go arrest their friends. We didn't learn about this in design school. Like, how do you prevent the torture of someone from their password? It's like, these are crazy things. And then also, the stuff that was happening on the site was stuff you would have in a city. People were reporting like, just really serious attempted murders and things like that. And it's like, you have a bunch of college, or not really, like, they were in college a year or two ago, all of a sudden need to make the decisions that a city or a government would have to make. So these were all things we had to figure out. The site's scaling very fast, so it's all the challenges you can imagine, but those are just a few. So like being under the watchful eye and just like designing a social system for scale is very great.
Hi.
That's in the back. What's your name? Yeah.
My last name. I'm Jennifer.
Jennifer.
Thanks for offering this session. I think it's a meeting of two really different worlds. And I'm wondering if you can actually elaborate on that meeting point, and for those of us who don't come from design school or design skill set or frame of mind, explaining more about the design world, that it's more than graphic design, maybe an icon or something like that, and what else does design include, and then where those meeting points with tech and businesses and startups.
You're basically trying to get at like, you're almost like, what's your background?
Leadership development.
Leadership development. So you're like, what the hell is design? Why does it matter, kind of thing?
Or
how does design work with?
I actually think the design is a really broad term, that it's not only the artistic, and that there's a field of educational design, which is kind of the hat that I wear. That you design experiences as well. But that's one approach to design. And then there's the artistic and the hard technical skills. Maybe more the technical skills of how that needs to meet the startup world.
Yeah. So let me. I think I can get at what you're asking. So when we think about design, one of the things that we've been trying to communicate to non-designers when we talk to them is design is much more than how something looks. So we say it's also how something should work. It's also how something should function. It's also what to build, right? So so that's design research to figure out what it is that we're actually trying to build. And when you think about design in that holistic sense, like all those pieces, it's very broad. And then you think about, okay, how does a company use design to do anything that they're trying to do better? And the reality is, for a long time, designers, we're trying to like hold on to design, because the worst thing how many of you are designers? Like, let's take raise your hand if you're a designer. Like really high? So maybe like, okay, 35-40%.
Do product managers count?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
45.
2 p.m.s to 30. That's a good ratio. I like that ratio. Let's say if you're a designer, your design process historically, you kind of want to hold on to it because everyone thinks they can design, right? So like what happens is like you're starting to design and someone's like, oh, can I take a look at that? It's very visual, and all of a sudden it's like, well, what if you moved it to the left? And someone else comes by, hey, what did you move to the right? And so all designers have felt the pain of having a process that everyone can like manipulate and be a part of. And it's frustrating. But the reality is almost everyone is a designer, whether or not they know it, right? So design is like the intentional act of making. So almost everyone is doing that to some degree in different ways. And so what we've tried to do is tell designers, look, don't try to hold on to this precious thing that we call design and not engage people. Try to be every designer in the company should be a design educator, should be bringing design to the entire company in some way, shape, or form. And if you do that well, you all of a sudden have a company where you have people that are that understand the value of design, that understand where their skills start and stop as non-designers, and that can engage with the process. So I'll give you like an example of how I did this at Facebook, since you wanted to know more about Facebook. This will answer 2 questions at once. One of the first things I did, so at Facebook, design was in engineering. Okay, so it's like head of engineering, head of design reported to that person, and then the rest of the designers. It's very bizarre, but the reason is because we wanted design and engineering to work in tandem. So what happens when you do that? How many designers work with HR, human resources? 0. How many designers work with legal? 0. How many designers work with customer support? 0. So why? Because we're in that realm. So one of the first things I did, I said, you know what? I'm going to meet with every head of a department, and I'm going to ask them, what would you do if you had design resources? So, head of legal, what would you do with design resources? I don't know. I never thought about that. Let me think about that. Head of sales, what would you do with design resources? Oh my God, I'm pitching Coca-Cola on a $10 million thing tomorrow. Look at what I'm showing them. And I'm like, wait a second. That's like a quarter of the revenue that we would have that year. It was a significant piece. And this is the air and water that this company needs is money. And you're trying to present something to Coca-Cola and it looks horrible. And you can't understand it, and it looks like it was done by someone in sales. Because it was done by someone in sales. Because design reports through the engineering. So with him, I said, look, what would you do if, I'm going to design with you for a month. The next month, I'm going to design with you. And he's like, this is amazing. So we worked on 4 pitches to big companies, and we got 3 out of the 4. Oh my God. Then you go to the head of sales and you say, look, these are the results, and we got money to invest in design for sales. So it wasn't the design team of Facebook, but we brought in external designers. Amazing. Customer support, what's going on? We're all using a tool that 2 engineers used, and they're kind of cobbling it together, and it doesn't work well. Show me how it works. So you have 50 people who are providing support for the million questions or concerns or whatever, and they're using a tool that was like 2 engineers like cobbled together in nights and weekends. And all of a sudden, as a designer, I start looking at this tool, and I'm like, this is terrible. And all these people who are like trying to manage the country that is Facebook have a terrible tool to do it. So me and 2 other engineers, we said, why don't we redesign this tool? In a few weeks, we basically made it so that each person could support double the amount of Facebook users. It's almost like you took that team of 50 and doubled it in 3 weeks. Amazing. So this was like, trying to find all the places within the company where design could interface. And if I only thought about design as like part of product, then it just doesn't have the impact. So that to me is like, design can have an impact all over an organization, and designers need to come in and be like, where are the leverage points in an organization that I can like be infusing design into that company? And I think one of the best companies that does it now is Airbnb, because the two founders are designers, and every single place in that company there is an understanding of what design does, there's understanding of how to interface with it, there's an understanding of the importance of it. So like a good example, when you join Airbnb, your first week is designed to the minute. Like every hour of every day, what you do, what you know, what you get is designed. So like a crazy example, well, America has terrible health insurance. We get these like terribly designed health insurance booklets. So from like United Health, these big companies, they create these booklets. They're terribly designed, but what are you gonna do? It's like, they're not your company. Airbnb said, that's fine, we'll redesign the thing. So they like take the booklet from a big health care insurance company, they redo it so that it's easier to understand for their employees. And that's like one of 100 things that's like been thought through so that the experience when someone joins, talk to someone who just spent their first week at Facebook and they're not just drinking the Kool-Aid, they're like guzzling from it. They're just like, I will be here forever. This is the most amazing company. So these are the kinds of things that I think like, if you're a leader or a business leader working at a company, look to all the different places where design can interface within the company, and you'd be surprised at how many places design can have kind of orders of magnitude impact. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi.
What's your name?
Nuit.
Nuit?
Nuit.
Okay.
So, how you make the world better? You didn't say.
How does who make the world better?
How you make the world better?
Designer fund?
Yeah.
So we try to make sure
In your
that
company.
yeah. So every company that we invest in, we need to make sure it has a good answer for that. So I'll give you like an example. So there's a company called Omada Health that we invested in. They do diabetes prevention. So basically everyone who goes through their programs has seen a reduction in their prevalence of diabetes. They sell them into companies, and so basically thousands of employees. So it's almost like the better they do, the fewer people have diabetes in America.
Right, because I thought that if perhaps you also design for in old people or wounded people,
Yeah.
or Okay, I work with computers. Okay.
Yeah.
Teaching softwares and etc.
Oh.
And of course, there's the saying of the software must be friendly.
Yes.
Of course. But also there is a part of the design.
So what's the question?
So if
Yeah.
you thought about design for old people that have problems because
Totally.
it's not very friendly, the software and
Yes.
for wounded people or cripples or
Yeah. Yeah. We
Can I
have.
ask something related to this? I mean, do you work only with for-profit companies or also?
Oh
with
yeah,
non-profit?
We
you can
only-
answer this one to us.
Yeah, so the fund invests in for-profit companies. We also do have a nonprofit arm that also works with nonprofits, and we've done a lot of projects with nonprofits. But we actually, what we've seen, so we actually started as a nonprofit, and one of the things that we saw was to invest in companies as a nonprofit was too difficult because we needed a separate set of documents. So if we actually wanted to have the change that we wanted, we actually needed to be a for-profit. But I think this, there's multiple modes. So for areas where there's a market that exists, a for-profit company is a good idea. For an area where there isn't a market and you need to infuse it with money because there is no market, then a nonprofit should be working at that. And actually designers should be looking at like, how do we use both kinds of entities. And then to your question, we look at that, so like the idea of accessibility, that's not like, oh, let's have a company that works at accessibility should be a thing across the entire spectrum.
That's
So
why I asked.
yeah, so we're constantly working with people who are building tools to increase accessibility. We try to make sure that all the people. Yeah, absolutely.
Nice, great.
Go ahead.
Hey, my name is Shirley.
What's your name?
Shirley, S-O-U-L-I.
Suruli. Suruli.
Yeah.
Hi.
I'm curious about like the design process, whether it's at Facebook or if you have other examples. But for example, when you said earlier, like, oh, you noticed that the message was problematic, so you just said like, well, I'm a designer, let's change it, and they changed it, and that was that. What about things like user testing and things which may have sort of found that issue that they weren't going to the site?
Yes.
What role does that play at Facebook? Other places?
Yeah, so I think, ideas can come from all over. So the design process, there's not like one process that's like, well, you didn't like get that from user research, so I'm not gonna do the thing. But I think, if I was really following like a good design process when I did that, like to me, I think that was like a design process breakdown. Because you can't just like see one thing, assess it for a half an hour, and just be like, okay, let's just like change the whole thing. If I was actually like thorough, then I would see the thing. I would then go talk to people in research and say, hey, is this something that you've seen? I should then also talk to people who are doing monetization and revenue and be like, hey, is there an impact of this on money? So that's like, that would be a better design process, right? So in a company, once you get to a scale of 200, 300, 400, usually, hopefully, there's like a user experience or research team that's constantly highlighting issues that people have, things that they're seeing that maybe you as a designer are not seeing, and then those things should be flowing into the roadmap. So the 2 PMs in here should be helping to triage a lot of those issues that are being raised by user research, and then having those flow into the design process. I think the other thing I'll say is that while there's all sorts of different ways to do a design process, most companies really mess up when they don't actually have a defined process that is at least the process they all want to have if everything goes well. So I think what happens is, I'll use Facebook again as an example. How does something get shipped at Facebook? Well, if you're working on photos and Mark is really interested in photos that week, then you're having a Zuck review every Tuesday and Friday, and you're meeting with legal, and there's going to be 4 other people that are going to be in the meeting, and blah, 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 blah. If Mark's not interested in the thing, then you can kind of work with just a PM and meet with just this person and then get that out the door. So there were all these different processes depending on how important was the thing, who actually cared about it, and what that caused is it's like people are like, well, maybe I don't want to work on the thing that is whatever Mark is excited about that month, or maybe I don't want to show this to other designers because they're just gonna like add more weeks to my shipping timeline. So people were kind of trying to create their own processes to like make things go out the door as fast as possible, and it wasn't what's the right process to make sure that things going out the door are really good. And it was once we finally defined what our ideal process is that everyone said, okay, if everything's going well, which it never does, but at least if everything's going well, this is what we want to see when we are going from 0 to everyone in the world on Facebook having the thing. And so that's what we defined, and once we had that, then it became much easier everyone can point to it, hey, did you do the review? Phase 1 ends with a review with these 3 people, did you do it? No, then you're not out of phase 1. So I think like, as early as possible, try to define what the process you want is. And you don't have to be religious about it. That's a Jerusalem joke. You don't have to be religious about it. You can use it as a framework and kind of spin off of it. All right, let's do a couple more. Yeah.
Michael. I'm a co-founder at early stage startup that's for digital product that's forward facing, and I wondered if you have like 2-3 tips for building good design habits for our company. We have a designer on board. She's on maternity leave, but right now. But still, we're a forward-facing company, and it's always like
a fitness company.
Forward-facing digital company.
What does that mean?
Means that we'll B2B to C. So
B2B
to C.
Okay.
So we build a widget for websites.
Okay.
Anyway, the question is about good design habits for the company. if you have any tips, I'm interested because we're still early stage. We can still do very big changes in how our team works, how it's built, who we hire.
Yeah, easy. Yeah, I'll give you a few easy ones. One is like incorporate design early on. So like if you're finding that you're going to your designer with like, here's what we want to build, instead of like, here's a problem and we don't know what we want to build, in the problem definition, not just the execution. Invest in a design system early on. The sooner you can do that, and again, as an early stage company, you don't want to go too far overboard, but if you have a defined design system, basically what that allows the entire company to do is start building without the designer always having to be involved.
I mean, system
what does a button look like? What does a tab look like? And actually have that be in code. And there's a bunch of blog posts around building good design systems. So that's a really good design. That's a really good habit. Incorporating research into your process. The sooner you can do that, the better. So I don't know, how big are you guys?
6.
6, so probably a little too early for like a dedicated user researcher, but like you guys should be, so I don't know, how often are you watching people use the thing?
Every week.
Every week. Yeah, so maybe, once a week?
Once a week I go user testing.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, you're already sort of doing that. Make sure the entire company sees that. Other good habits, making sure that design is thinking about design not just in the widget, but like in the entire company. What does our space look like? How are we telling our story, right? Like, how many of you want to join a widget company? Yeah, so you probably need a better story than we're a widget company. So those are the kinds of things that designers, storytellers should be thinking about.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool. Yeah.
Do you think Facebook use design today as something in the wrong way? I mean, trying to acquire...
Yeah, next question.
I guess you have the you and Zuckerberg have the same model of doing good, but I think Facebook's still doing good. But
I'll tell you my nuanced kind of thoughts on this, and I'll speak freely and I'll like keep it in this room, but I'll be open.
Shall we stop the Facebook Live?
Oh wow! Actually, no, it's actually fine. So okay, that's fine. Let me self-censor real quick. So no.
And I also want to add something to this question, if I can. One of the things that happened in 2007, as you said, that there was a lot of user protest against people were afraid to lose their privacy when they moved to the newsfeed and the live feed. Mm-hmm. And as you said, you started the communication, design communication, and don't remember the name of the team. You said the communication design team. The communication design team, who actually helped the users to understand what's going on and how to live with those changes without being fear for their privacy. But today we see the opposite. Like some can say that Facebook is actually kind of using, and we gave up our privacy. And do you think it's related to the design and the communication process that you did? Because the difference between 2007 and 2017 and all of the Cambridge Analytica scandal.
Yeah, I'll turn Facebook inside out for you a little bit. So in 2007, when we were building the product, we basically believed that the more you knew about other people, the more empathy you had for other people, and the more that you could connect people with each other. And I don't mean just having you feel closer to your friend or to your family, but I mean actually like having you feel closer to strangers. And some of the things that we did there are like, you know, if you think about what you would say to someone online, you wouldn't say those things to them to their face. And so, you know, we were one of the first sites where it's like you put your real name. We wanted you to put your real photo, like the closest that you could go to your real self. And then we felt like if you put your real self out there and we could have people learn more about each other, that you create empathy and you create connections. and it worked, and it was really good at doing that. And so, you know, as a company filled with relatively young, relatively positive-minded people, we just said, let's continue to do that. And like, oh my God, what an amazing thing that we could create. And what we didn't do is we didn't stop to think about, and actually, you know, I'm using generalities, but, you know, there was some of this, but I would say not enough, of how could someone abuse the system? Or how could the system go wrong? And over time, it's, you know, you have a thing kind of like, is it a telephone? Is a telephone good or bad? It brings, a lot of people can call each other, and there's a lot of good that comes from that, but also you can use the telephone to like tell someone to fuck off or something like that. So the telephone as a communication medium could be used for good and bad. And Facebook as a communication medium could be used for good and bad. And we saw all the good and bad things, but when you looked across the millions of people, the good was so far outweighing any of the bad things that it was just, for us, it was like, this is such a social good. It's just a no-brainer that it's a social good. And we continue to operate with that, with kind of that hope and that positive thinking and that sort of thing. And I think what we did not anticipate is just like how much people would try to, you know, use that thing for their own benefit, how much like different organizations would try to like manipulate the thing, take advantage of the thing. And I think we probably didn't have all the like little edge cases. That's like one thing. I think the second thing that we maybe didn't anticipate was, you know, the fact that the newsfeed, what it does is it gives you more information about the people and things that you care about. And what we never did was, we never said, we're going to give you more information about the people and things that you should care about. Because we never wanted to be in the position of being kind of the big brother, or the entity that like, oh, well, we know better, you know, you should learn more about this, or you should care more about this. And so by not taking that position, what we did was, we basically, you know, this is the metaphor I use, is like, you come over to my place for dinner, and I say, okay, for dinner I have ice cream, and I have a bunch of vegetables. What do you want? And you're like, well, I kind of want ice cream. It's like way better. It's like, oh, great. And then the next time you come over for dinner, I'm like, well, they don't like vegetables. So it's like, do you want 1 scoop of ice cream or like 2 scoops of ice cream? You're like, 2 scoops of ice cream. So then we start giving people 2 scoops of ice cream. And then like next time it's like, ice cream sundae or 2 scoops, ice cream sundae, right? So we basically created a system that gave people more of what they wanted. And we didn't want to say, well, we're going to give you more of what we think you need. And there's a reason for that. And it's, you know, like, we could sit here for years and debate this. When you actually start thinking about it, like what that would manifest into, it's a very hard problem. It's a very like tough thing. But like I think one of the big errors was like the idea that Facebook is a neutral thing and we're just giving people what they want and that'll just result in good. And the reality is you give people what they want and like that doesn't always result in good. Now I would also say that people want a scapegoat. And so I think one of the things I saw with like the election is like, let's pile on Facebook because I need to blame something. And we know that something happened here and like, let's blame it. So I think like, you know, what was it misused? Yes, clearly it was misused by entities in and around Facebook, but like from outside organizations. Could Facebook have done more to foreshadow this? Probably. Does it also do a ton of good in the world? Yes. When will they do more to like adapt and change? Also, yes. I think people underestimate just how, you know, and it's because we're on the out, you know, when you're on the outside and you're not part of those conversations, it's easy to just be like, well, they just want money and they just want to be powerful. And the reality is like for the people inside there, that stuff was just not. That was not a driving force, and it wasn't a driving force for Mark ever. And I remember, like when I interviewed, you know, at Facebook, And I kind of asked him, I was like, how do we make money here? And he's like, we're gonna make money, but that's not even interesting. He's like, if you want to work here, it's like to connect people and to make the world like have more empathy. Those were the things that you can tell when someone's like excited, and you can tell when someone's like the second you talk to Mark about money when he was 22, 23, and you know he's grown up now, but he still has the same it's still the same motivation. And when you talk to him, it was just like it's just not an interesting thing. He used to say it's like money is the air and water. It's the thing that it's the space, it's the computers, it's what provides the resources for us to do the work that we want to do. But it's in and of itself as an end goal, it's just not that interesting, right? And so that's, you know, was it designed to do wrong? It was definitely not designed to do wrong. Was it designed to prevent wrong enough? I don't know. Like, I think it's like tough to say. Now I think we know that like Facebook needs to be more careful about how people can manipulate it. I think Facebook needs to take a stronger point of view around how the system should be used. I think they will do that. But I think also, by the way, Facebook is one part of this very large issue that is happening all over the world of like people just being around the things that they like, around these like growing extremes. So it's easy to like say like Facebook's to blame. It's just part of this larger thing, and we all need to be like fighting against it basically. And I think we will. Yeah, go ahead. Last question. I know it's 5 o'clock. I don't know what you said as far as the time.
You said you give people what they want, but very early in your talk you said something about like you design something and then you get like many complaints.
Oh yeah.
You started with it.
Yeah.
Which I found interesting. So maybe you can explain this more, and maybe also if you design something and then you get many complaints.
Yeah.
Does it mean that you do something wrong?
Yeah. So so maybe I'll answer the second one. Maybe I'll answer, and then I'll answer the first. We know that so people don't like change. They don't like change. So any change, like people are going to complain about it. It doesn't matter if it's good change. So you start with that premise, and so then what does that mean? That when you do something new and different, how did you? What are their complaints? So if people, we would look at what people would write in with. If they wrote in with, "I can't find my friends anymore," that's a big problem. If they wrote in, "I miss the old Facebook," that's not a problem. They'll get used to the new Facebook. Because guess what? The new Facebook is going to be the old Facebook when we do the new change, and then they're going to want this one, right? So it's like, what you need to get them used to is that this thing is going to continue to adapt, and here are the values and principles that are going to drive that adaptation. So what we did was, we would listen to what the complaints were and make sure that it's not, "I'm lost, I'm confused," it's more, "It's different, so I hate it." So that was like the approach that we took. Your first question was if basically like you gave someone what you think they wanted.
Like you said you give people what they want, but then it kind of contradicts with
so people want
they complain about.
So people want to connect more with their friends. People, like we knew what people wanted. And when you gave them a new product, it could be that it's like, "I hate it because it's different," but I'm also looking not at just what you say, but what you do, right? So it's like if you say, "Well, it's different," and then I'm like, "Well, actually, but now this person is talking to a lot more of their friends." Well, and then all of a sudden a week or two later, now they stop complaining, and it's like, okay, this is how it worked.
Did it happen that after you received many complaints, then you change it back? Or?
Not change it back, but we would adjust it. Almost like literally every time. Yeah. Almost no change is like it's done. It's always like we're changing it now, and the world changes, and people change, and you're constantly having to change it.
Do you work with an Israeli company?
Does Facebook work with Israeli companies?
No, your firm. I don't care about Facebook here.
Yeah.
Everyone. Your firm.
do you define Israeli companies as companies located in Israel? We have not invested in an Israeli company yet, but we have invested in Israeli founders.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
cool.
We really need to finish, but last
Yeah.
question, and
Oh.
it's something that came from the people that watching us at home. If you can give an advice for an entrepreneur, designer entrepreneur is dreaming, just graduating, wants to start his own business, his own startup.
Their
so
own business?
just a new startup. So if you can give them one advice before we finish here, and
Advice for a young
for a designer
young
entrepreneur,
entrepreneur who wants to
Yeah.
start their own company.
like
Yeah,
the
I think-
golden advice, a gold.
I mean, there's so one I would say is like go to Designer Fund and like read all the blog posts that we've written on all these kinds of things. But if I had to like, you know, maybe the key thing, or maybe two big points. One is choose your problem well, because we see too many people who are starting companies because they just want to start a company, and you're like, well, there's like 4 companies doing this pretty well, so like just join them. Why are you? We don't need another company doing the same thing slightly differently. So like unless you have a very strong point of view around like why you need to solve this thing. So choose your problem really well. As a designer founder, really understand all the things that are involved in running a business. And there's dozens of these things. And then basically say, what are the things I'm good at? What are the things I'm gonna get good at? And what are the things I'm never gonna get good at and I need to hire people around me to do? And make sure that you are honest with yourself. You know, if you're bad at accounting and don't like accounting and don't want to learn about accounting, then don't try to be the person that's like doing the accounting for the company early on. Like bring someone else to do that. So that's probably the second biggest kind of piece of advice is make sure that you know where the holes are and bring in engineers and business people who can supplement those. And then what's the other big mistakes I would say? The other thing I would say is like don't be so precious on design. We see a lot of designer founders who like they have an idea and then they start like polishing pixels, and you're like, you don't even know if you're solving the right problem. You don't know, you don't have the right people. You don't have money to do, like, you need to move. So like, I think like designers think more broadly when you're starting a company about all the different pieces, and don't be so precious early on about all the different things, because it's always going to change. The name's going to change probably. The logo's going to, it's like, you see designers, they spend months on the logo for their company, and it's like, did you even do like a IP check? Like, do you even have like the ability to use that name? You're going to change the name probably in the first like year because you realize like, oh, we want to do this, now it's actually needs to be this. These things change. So like, don't be so precious.
Okay, thank
Cool.
you very
Yeah.
much.